The night was quiet, but not peaceful. Smoke still rose from the ruins of the old battlefield. The war had ended in this place days ago, but its scars were still fresh. Broken walls stood like skeletons, and the air carried the smell of ash and burned metal. In the shadows of these ruins, a human soldier moved slowly. He carried a small pack on his back, his boots crunching on the scattered stones. He was tall and broad, his face tired from endless patrols, but his eyes were sharp, always searching. He did not walk like the others in his unit who marched loudly with pride. He walked quietly, as if carrying a secret no one else should know. Inside a half-collapsed shelter, hidden deep behind rubble, an alien mother and her small daughter waited. They had survived the battle, but barely. The mother was thin, her skin pale from lack of food, her eyes sharp with fear. Her daughter clung to her side, too weak to cry, her lips dry, her little hands trembling. The mother had told her child not to make a sound, not even a whisper, because humans were dangerous. Humans were killers, she said. But tonight, when the child looked out through a crack in the wall, she saw something that confused her. The human soldier stopped just a few steps away. He looked around, making sure no one followed. Then he reached into his pack and placed something on a broken stone near the rubble. It was food wrapped carefully in cloth, a loaf of bread, some dried meat, and even a piece of fruit. He did not call out. He did not demand anything. He simply set it down. And after one long look at the ruins, he walked away, disappearing into the shadows. The child's eyes grew wide. Her stomach ached. Her mouth watered. She pulled at her mother's sleeve and whispered in her own tongue, "Food, Mama, food." The mother's eyes narrowed, suspicion fighting against hunger. Could this be a trick? Could the human be trying to lure them out? But the smell of the bread reached her, and her daughter's pleading eyes were too much. Slowly she crawled out of the ruins, her hands shaking. She grabbed the food and pulled it back inside. The child devoured the fruit in seconds. Juice running down her face, the mother forced herself to eat slowly, still looking toward the dark where the soldier had gone. That night, the mother did not sleep. Her mind was filled with questions. Why would a human feed them? Why not finish the war by letting them starve? Why take such a risk? The next evening, the soldier came again. The mother and daughter watched carefully, their hearts beating fast. Once more, he placed food near the stone, and once more he left without a word. This time there was water too, a small flask. The child smiled weakly, her little voice whispering in surprise. "The human," she said, as if the word was no longer only filled with fear. The mother hushed her, but even she felt something change inside her chest. Days passed, and every evening the human came. Sometimes he brought bread, sometimes cooked beans, sometimes fresh fruit that looked rare in these ruins. He never stayed, never spoke, never asked for thanks. He just left the food and walked away. But the daughter's eyes followed him every time. She began to wait for him at the crack in the wall, her tiny hands clutching the stones, her eyes shining with hope. Her hunger was no longer only for food, but for his return. The mother tried to remain strong, but she knew the truth. Without this human, they would have been dead already. She remembered the way he walked, always checking the shadows, always careful. It was clear he did not want his own people to know. If the other soldiers discovered his secret, he could be punished, even killed. That made his actions even more confusing. Why would a human risk his life for them? One evening, the mother noticed something different. When the soldier placed the food down, he hesitated for the first time. His eyes turned toward the ruins where they hid. For a moment, it felt like his gaze met hers through the cracks. Her breath caught in her throat, her heart raced. Did he know they were watching? Did he want them to see him? The child whispered softly, "Mama, his eyes, they are not angry." The mother had no answer. She only held her daughter close, unsure whether to fear the human more or to trust him. The days of war had taught her that humans were merciless, but this one was different. Each evening, as he left more food, The question grew heavier in her heart. What did he truly want from them? And why, when she looked into his tired human eyes, did she not see hatred, but something else she could not name? In the ruins of war, a fragile thread had begun to weave between them. Not of words, not of promises, but of silent acts of kindness. And though neither knew where it would lead, the mother and daughter both felt it. A story had begun, a story that would change everything. The nights kept passing, and with every night the human soldier returned. His steps were always slow, always careful, as if he feared the eyes of his own people more than the danger of the ruins. He would set food down on the same broken stone, glance once around, and then leave without a word. It became a rhythm, like the rising of the moons, like the breath of the wind. Inside the ruined shelter, the alien mother and daughter waited in silence. At first, it was hunger that drove them to wait. But soon, it became something else. The daughter's eyes grew brighter every time she heard the crunch of his boots outside. Her little heart raced with a strange excitement, a mix of fear and hope. The mother pretended not to care, but even she found herself listening for him, her ears sharp in the quiet. One evening, as the soldier placed down the food, he paused for longer than usual, his head tilted slightly, as if he knew they were watching. For the first time, the daughter could not stop herself. Her small hand pushed away the stone covering their hiding spot. Her wide eyes peeked out, glowing faintly in the dim light. The human soldier turned his head and their eyes met. The child froze, her body stiff with fear, but the soldier did not shout, did not raise his weapon. Instead, his face softened, his lips curved into the smallest of smiles. He nodded once, slowly as if saying he understood. Then he turned and walked away, his boots fading into the night. The daughter whispered in her mother's ear, her voice trembling but filled with wonder. "He saw me, Mama." And he smiled. The mother pulled her close, her heart heavy with confusion. Why would he smile at them? Why would he risk letting them know he was not their enemy? The next day, when the soldier came again, something new happened. This time, along with bread and beans, there was a small carved figure. It was made from wood, rough but shaped like a tiny bird with wings spread. The child gasped softly and clutched it in her hands. She whispered in broken human words she had learned long ago, "Thank you." The soldier stopped for the briefest moment, his back turned. Perhaps he heard her, perhaps not. But when he left, the silence he left behind was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with something fragile. A silent exchange had been made, not with words, but with trust. That night, the mother watched her daughter sleep with the wooden bird held tightly in her hands. The child's face was peaceful for the first time since the war began. The mother's heart ached, not from hunger this time, but from a question that grew stronger each day. Could a human truly mean no harm? Could kindness exist even after so much blood had been spilled? The soldier too felt the change. As he walked back to his camp, his thoughts were heavy. He had told himself at first it was just pity, just a soldier's small rebellion against the cruelty of war. But every evening, when he saw the small eyes peering at him from the shadows, something deeper stirred inside him. He could not explain it, but he knew. If anyone discovered what he was doing, it would not just be his career that ended. It could be his life. Still, he came back. Still, he placed food down, and still he pretended it was nothing, though his heart knew otherwise. One evening, as rain poured over the ruins, the soldier arrived soaked, his uniform clinging to him. He placed down bread wrapped in cloth to keep it dry. As he turned to leave, a soft voice whispered again, "Thank you." Clearer this time, trembling, small, but brave. The soldier froze, his heart pounding. Slowly he turned his head. Through the crack in the rubble he saw her, the alien child, her eyes shining in the dim rainlight. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The rain fell between them, washing away the ashes on the ground. The soldier gave a slow nod, and though his voice was rough from silence, he finally spoke a single word. You're welcome. The mother pulled her daughter back inside quickly, her heart racing. She wanted to scold her child for speaking, for breaking the rule of silence, but she could not. Because deep inside, she too had felt the weight of that moment. A line had been crossed, a barrier broken. The human and the aliens had spoken. And once words are spoken, they cannot be taken back. That night, as the storm raged outside, the mother sat awake, staring at her sleeping child. Her daughter clutched the wooden bird, her small chest rising and falling gently. The mother thought of the human's tired eyes, his voice when he said those two simple words. It was not the voice of an enemy. It was the voice of someone who cared. But caring was dangerous. Caring could destroy them all. And yet, as the rain fell and the ruins shivered in the storm, she knew it was already too late. The silent exchange had begun, and nothing in the galaxy could stop it now. The ruins no longer felt as silent as before. Every evening the same sound came, the slow, steady footsteps of the human soldier. The mother and daughter no longer hid in complete fear. The child, her eyes wide with hope, began to wait at the crack in the wall. Her tiny fingers pressed against the cold stone. Her hunger was still sharp, but something else was growing stronger than hunger. It was trust, fragile and uncertain, like a candle flame trembling in the wind. The soldier placed food as always. But this time the child did not hide quickly. Instead, she peeked longer, and when he glanced toward her, she smiled, small and shy. The soldier froze, the smile catching him off guard. He had not seen such an expression in months. Not from his fellow soldiers, not from civilians, not from anyone. War had stolen smiles from the galaxy, yet here, in the middle of broken stone, a starving alien child smiled at him. For the first time, he let himself smile back. It was brief, almost uncertain, but it was real, and in that moment, the bond between them deepened. The mother watched with her heart tight. Her instinct told her to pull her daughter back, to remind her that humans were dangerous. But another part of her, the part that had watched this man return every single day, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this one was different. She could not explain why, but his silence, his patience, and now his smile told her something words could not. The days passed, and the bond grew slowly, carefully. Sometimes when the soldier brought food, the daughter whispered small words. She remembered from her lessons long ago. "Hello," she said once, her voice soft like wind. The soldier paused, turned slightly, and answered in the same gentle tone. "Hello." The mother held her breath, fear rushing through her, but nothing happened. No violence, no anger, just a quiet word shared between two beings on opposite sides of a war. One evening, the soldier did something unexpected. Instead of only food, he left behind a small piece of cloth folded carefully. The mother opened it and found dried herbs, their smell sharp and bitter. Her eyes widened in shock, for she recognized them. They were healing herbs, rare and valuable. She turned the leaves in her hand and realized he must have traded or risked punishment to get them. Her daughter's cough had been getting worse, and somehow, he had noticed. The mother sat in silence, the herbs pressed against her chest. Her walls of hatred and fear cracked just a little more that night. It was not just food anymore, it was care. But with care came danger. The soldier's absence would not always go unnoticed. Already the patrols were moving closer to the ruins, their searches harsher, their voices louder. The mother knew if the soldier was caught, his punishment would be swift. And if she and her daughter were discovered, there would be no mercy. The fragile bond between them was a risk, yet neither side could let it go. The daughter grew braver each day. She no longer waited only at the crack in the wall. Sometimes she stepped out just a little, her bare feet touching the cold stones. One evening, as the soldier placed food, she ran forward and placed the little wooden bird back on the stone. He looked at it, confused. Then the child pointed at herself, and then at the bird. Her meaning was clear. She wanted him to know she had kept it safe, that she understood it was a gift. The soldier nodded, his throat tight, and pushed the bird gently back toward her. "It's yours," he said softly, his voice rough but warm. The child beamed, holding it close once more. The mother watched this exchange, her emotions tangled. She wanted to stop it, to remind her daughter that trusting humans was dangerous. But when she saw the child's thin face light up with joy, she could not. She had not seen her daughter smile like that since before the war. How could she take it away? Still, the mother could not ignore her fear. One evening, when the soldier left, she whispered to her daughter, "Do not trust too much, my little star. Humans can take as quickly as they give." But her daughter only whispered back, "His eyes are kind, Mama, not like the others." The mother lay awake long after her daughter slept, the words echoing in her mind. She remembered the soldier's eyes too, tired yet gentle, carrying a weight she did not understand. Perhaps her daughter was right. Perhaps kindness lived. Even in those they had called enemies, the fragile bond grew stronger. But bonds, once seen, could not remain hidden forever. The soldier knew his fellow men would question his absence, the extra food missing from rations. And the mother knew the patrols were circling closer each night, their shadows moving like wolves around the ruins. The bond between them was real, now undeniable. But the question that haunted them both was the same. How long could a fragile bond survive in the middle of war? The ruins grew colder as the night stretched on. The wind carried whispers of soldiers searching, their boots echoing closer, their voices louder. The alien mother felt her chest tighten every time she heard them. It was no longer safe. The walls were closing in, and yet every evening the human soldier still came, still placed food, still glanced toward the shadows where he knew they watched. The daughter's cough had softened thanks to the herbs, but her body was still weak. The mother wrapped her close every night, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Her daughter trusted the soldier more now, smiling at the sound of his steps. But the mother carried fear heavier than ever, fear not of hunger, but of discovery. One night, when the soldier came, his face was different. His jaw was tense, his eyes sharp as he placed the food down quickly. He did not linger as before. Instead, he looked straight toward the ruins. His voice came low, a whisper barely carried by the wind. "Hide tomorrow." The mother's blood froze. She pulled her daughter back into the shadows, her heart racing. What did he mean? What was coming? The soldier left without another word, his steps fast, urgent. The mother sat in silence, the food untouched. She stared into the dark and wondered if she had just heard a warning, or a trap. The old fears rose again, but then she remembered the herbs, the wooden bird, the quiet kindness in his tired eyes. Could such eyes deceive? The next day was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against the skin. The mother kept her daughter deep inside the ruins, refusing to let her peek out. Her body trembled as hours crawled by. Then, in the distance, the sound came. Dozens of boots, weapons clinking, voices sharp with command. A patrol, larger than usual. They moved like wolves through the broken streets, their torches casting cruel light on the rubble. The mother held her daughter close, pressing her hand over her little mouth to keep her silent. Her daughter's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, understanding. The sound of soldiers came nearer, boots crushing stones, voices shouting orders. They were searching, tearing through the ruins. The mother closed her eyes, expecting the end. But then, from far off, a different sound broke the night. Gunfire, short and sharp, a distraction. The patrol broke into chaos, some soldiers running toward the noise, others shouting in confusion. The search broke apart, their steps fading into the distance. The ruins returned to silence. The mother loosened her grip, her body shaking from fear and relief. Her daughter looked at her with wide eyes, whispering, "Mama, he saved us." The mother swallowed hard, unable to deny it. Somehow, the human had known. Somehow he had pulled danger away. That evening when he returned, his face was pale, his uniform dirtied. He placed the food down quickly. But before leaving, his eyes met the shadows, his lips moved, silent but clear. Not safe. The mother's heart sank. The bond that had grown between them was now aflame in the open wind. It could not remain hidden, Not anymore. If the patrols returned and found them together, both sides would pay the price. That night, the mother sat awake, watching her daughter sleep, her mind filled with questions she could not answer. Why would a human risk so much? Why would he care if they lived or died? She remembered the way he had spoken, not with hatred, not with superiority, but with simple warning. It was not the voice of an enemy. It was the voice of someone protecting them. The next day, the soldier came again, his steps slower, heavier. When he placed down the food, he did not turn away immediately. Instead, he lingered, looking at the ruins. The child peeked out, clutching the wooden bird, her eyes full of trust. The soldier's lips curved into a faint smile, but his eyes carried a shadow. He knew the danger was growing, and so did they. The mother stepped closer than she ever had before. Her body trembled, but she forced herself to speak. Her voice was rough, her words broken, but the meaning clear. Why? You risk? The soldier froze, hearing her voice for the first time. He turned, his eyes meeting hers through the gap in the stones. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and full. Then, in a voice soft but steady, he answered, "Because you have a child." The mother's breath caught, her chest tightening. She had no answer, no way to deny the truth of his words. The soldier stepped back, his eyes lingering one last time, then turned and left. The ruins fell silent again, but this time the silence was filled with something new. The knowledge that their fragile bond was no longer hidden. It had become a shield, one he was willing to raise even against his own kind. But shields can break, and the shadows of danger were still circling. The mother knew the day was coming when silence and food would not be enough, and she feared what choice the soldier would make when that day arrived. The ruins had grown restless. The soldier knew it. The mother felt it. Even the little daughter sensed it in the air. Every day, the danger of discovery pressed closer. Every night, the soldier's steps grew heavier, and the mother's fear sharpened like glass. Still he came. Still he brought food, and still the little girl waited for him with hopeful eyes. But this hope now carried a weight. It was no longer only survival, it was trust. A trust that could break them all. An evening, the mother finally spoke again. Her voice was quiet, shaky, her words broken but clear. "Why you help us?" The soldier looked at her through the crack in the ruins, his face lined with exhaustion. For a long moment he did not answer, his silence deep as the ruins themselves. Then, with a sigh, he said, "Because no one should starve." Not a child. The mother's throat tightened, her eyes burning. She wanted to argue, to remind herself that this was her enemy, but the words would not come. She saw the truth in his eyes, and it broke something inside her. Hatred was easier than this, easier than feeling a debt she could never repay. The next day, the soldier did not arrive at the usual hour. The mother's heart pounded as the night deepened. Had he been caught? Had he abandoned them? Her daughter cried softly, whispering, "He will come, Mama, he will." But doubt twisted inside her like a knife. At last, near dawn, footsteps came. The soldier appeared, limping, his arm bandaged roughly, his face pale. He dropped the pack of food near the stone and leaned against the wall, his breath heavy. The mother gasped softly, clutching her daughter close. He had been hurt, and yet he had come. The child crawled forward, tears in her eyes, whispering, "You hurt?" The soldier looked at her, his tired eyes softening. "It's nothing," he said, though his body told another story. He waved his hand toward the food, urging them to eat. The mother stepped out, further than ever before, her body trembling but her will strong. She picked up the pack, then looked at him directly for the first time. Her voice shook as she said, "You risk life, and for us." He gave a faint smile, though pain flickered across his face. Some risks are worth it. For the first time, the mother felt her heart soften. The soldier was no longer just a shadow who brought food. He was a man, fragile and bleeding, yet still standing for them. Trust was no longer a choice, it was being forced into her hands. That night, the mother used the herbs he had once given to clean his wound. She did it quickly, silently, afraid he might vanish before dawn. The soldier did not stop her, did not pull away. He only watched, his tired eyes filled with something she could not name. When she finished, he whispered, "Thank you." Her heart ached at the sound of it. Days passed, and trust grew stronger, but so did the danger. The soldier's absence was noticed. The rations he gave were missed. Other soldiers began to whisper to watch him more closely. One evening, as he left the ruins, he caught sight of two figures watching from a distance. He knew then, time was running out. The next night he came without food, his hands empty. The mother stiffened, fear tightening her chest. But the soldier raised his hand, his voice urgent. "They are watching me." The little girl clutched her wooden bird, her face pale. The mother pulled her close, her eyes darting to the soldier. "What? We do?" she whispered. His answer came firm, steady. "You must stay hidden, no matter what happens." The mother's heart pounded. She could see the truth. He was risking everything, and soon the test of their bond would come. If he was caught, he could save himself by giving them up. But if he did not, his life would be destroyed. Would he still protect them? The next day, the mother overheard soldiers passing near the ruins, their voices sharp, filled with suspicion. "He sneaks away at night," one said. "He takes food, always vanishes toward the ruins." Another replied. The mother's blood turned cold. They were hunting not only her and her daughter, but him as well. That evening, when the soldier arrived, his face was grim. He looked at the ruins, his eyes darker than she had ever seen. "They know," he whispered, his voice tight, the mother's chest clenched with fear. She grabbed her daughter, ready to flee. But where could they go? The galaxy had no safe place left. For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then the soldier stepped closer, his voice firm. "I will not betray you." The mother's breath caught, tears welling in her eyes. Her daughter clutched, the wooden bird whispering softly, "I trust you." The soldier's jaw tightened, but his eyes softened as he looked at them both. This was the test, the moment where trust could break or hold. And though danger pressed closer with every breath, their fragile bond did not shatter. Instead, it grew stronger, forged in fear and kindness, in choices that no war could erase. But war was not done with them yet. And the mother knew the real storm had only just begun. The nights no longer felt safe. The soldier's steps were faster, now his eyes sharper, his visits shorter. The mother noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he always looked over his back before leaving food. The daughter too could feel it. Her little hands clutched the wooden bird tighter every evening. The silence between them was heavy with one truth. Their secret would not last. The mother had seen it herself. Shadows moving in the distance, soldiers watching from afar. The whispers she heard from patrols confirmed her fears. "They say he's hiding something," one voice muttered. "They'll catch him soon," another replied. Every word cut into her chest. She knew that if they found him, their fragile bond would shatter under the weight of war. Food became scarcer. The soldier could no longer bring much without being noticed. Some nights he came empty-handed, his face filled with frustration and guilt. The mother told her daughter to be grateful for whatever he could bring, but her own heart ached. Her child's body was thin, her eyes tired, and now the cough had returned, worse than before. One evening, when the soldier arrived, the mother stepped out further than ever before. Her body trembled, but her voice was firm. Sick," she said, pointing to her daughter. The soldier froze, his eyes filled with alarm. He crouched down, lowering himself to the child's level. Her lips were pale, her breathing shallow. He clenched his fists, anger burning inside him. Not at them, but at the war that had brought them here. The mother's voice cracked, her eyes desperate. "She die. If stay here." The soldier's heart pounded, the weight of choice crushing him. He had tried to keep his distance, to help quietly from the shadows. But now, shadows were not enough. The child would not survive another week like this. That night he could not sleep in his camp. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing the sound of the child's weak cough in his memory. His fellow soldiers laughed and spoke loudly around the fire, but their words turned darker. "Tomorrow, we search again," one said. "We'll drag out anything hiding in those ruins," another added. The soldier's chest tightened, his fists clenching. He knew what that meant. By tomorrow, the mother and daughter would be found. The breaking point had arrived. He could no longer pretend this bond was just a secret act of kindness. He had to choose. Either stay silent and let them be taken or step into the storm with them. The next evening he came to the ruins with no food. His eyes burned with urgency, his voice low but strong. "They will come tomorrow," he whispered. The mother's body stiffened, her arms wrapping around her daughter. The little girl's eyes filled with fear, her lips trembling. "Please," she whispered in broken human words. "Don't let them take us." The soldier's chest ached at the sound of her plea. He looked at them. 2 lives clinging to hope. 2 lives who had no one else. He could not walk away anymore. He dropped to one knee, his voice rough. "You cannot stay here." The mother's eyes widened, her body tense. "Where we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. He swallowed hard, the words heavy. "My shelter." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with fear and disbelief. The mother stared at him, torn between mistrust and desperation. To step into a human's shelter was unthinkable, a risk greater than anything. But her daughter's body shook against her, each cough cutting like a blade. If they stayed, there was no future, only death. The soldier extended his hand, his eyes steady. "Trust me," he said. The mother's heart pounded, her breath shallow. Her daughter, weak but awake, looked up at her with wide eyes, whispering softly, "Mama, please." The mother's chest broke, her pride and fear shattering under the weight of her child's voice. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she reached forward and placed her hand in his. It was cold, shaking, but it was real. In that single touch, the bond between them crossed a line that could never be undone. The soldier pulled them gently to their feet, his voice urgent but calm. "We leave before dawn." The mother nodded, holding her daughter close. The child clutched her wooden bird in one hand and the soldier's hand in the other, her fragile trust shining brighter than fear. That night, as the ruins slept under a cold moon, the soldier prepared. He packed what little supplies he could, checked his weapons, and steeled himself for what was to come. He knew the risk. If anyone discovered them in his shelter, he would be branded a traitor. But the thought of leaving them to die in the ruins was worse than death itself. The mother too sat awake, her daughter curled against her, her mind swirled with fear, doubt, and a fragile hope. She whispered to herself, "May the stars forgive me," as if crossing a sacred line. But when she thought of the soldier's eyes, of the way he had stood for them, she knew there was no other choice. Dawn would bring hunters, soldiers with weapons and orders. But before dawn, they would move. Before dawn, the bond forged in silence, and food would break the walls of fear. And for the first time, they would step together into the unknown. The breaking point had come, and they had chosen to face it, not apart, but together. The night before dawn was heavy. The ruins felt alive with whispers, as if the broken stones themselves knew what was coming. The soldier stood ready, his pack on his back, his weapon slung low, his eyes watching the horizon. Beside him, the alien mother clutched her weak daughter close, the child's breath shallow, her little hands gripping both her mother's arm and the wooden bird she carried everywhere. The soldier whispered, "It's time." His voice was steady, though his heart thundered in his chest. The mother hesitated, her eyes filled with fear and doubt. But one look at her daughter, pale and trembling, gave her the strength to nod. They followed him, their footsteps quiet against the broken stones. The ruins faded behind them, swallowed by shadow. Ahead lay the soldier's shelter, hidden deep within the human camp's edge. Every step was a risk, every sound a threat. The mother's heart pounded with terror, but she held her daughter tight, trusting the man who had risked everything. When they reached his shelter, the soldier opened the door quickly and guided them inside. It was small, built of steel and wood, filled with the faint scent of smoke and oil. To the mother it felt strange, alien yet safe. The child collapsed onto the bed, her body sinking into the softness. Her eyes fluttered closed, the first true rest she had in weeks. The mother stood frozen, her eyes scanning the space, her breath sharp. She had stepped into the heart of enemy territory, yet here she was alive. The soldier watched her carefully, his eyes kind but cautious. "You are safe here," he said softly. She turned to him, her voice low and shaking. "If they find us, you die too." He nodded, his jaw firm. "I know," he replied, "but I will not let them take you." The words sank deep into her chest. No one had spoken to her like that in so long. Not as an enemy, not as a stranger, but as someone worth protecting. Her eyes burned with tears she could not stop. She lowered herself beside her daughter, whispering, "Rest, my star, rest." Days passed in secret. The soldier left at dawn and returned at night. Always careful, always carrying food and water. He checked her daughter's health, bringing what little medicine he could steal or trade. The child grew stronger, her cheeks filling with color, her cough fading. She laughed softly one evening, a sound so pure it filled the tiny shelter with warmth. The soldier froze, the sound hitting him like a forgotten memory. He had not heard laughter since before the war began. The mother saw his face soften, and for the first time, she allowed herself a faint smile. But danger was never far. Whispers in the camp grew louder, soldiers speaking of traitors, of secrets. One night, the soldier entered the shelter pale and tense. "They suspect me," he whispered. The mother's heart raced, her fear rising. "What? We do?" He looked at her, his eyes burning with a decision long held back. "We stay together," he said firmly, "or we fall together." The mother's breath caught, her chest tight. She looked at her daughter, then back at him. Her voice shook. "Why us?" He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Because when I saw you, I did not see an enemy. I saw a mother. I saw a child. I saw life worth saving." Her eyes filled with tears, her throat too tight to answer. In silence, she reached out and touched his arm, her hand trembling. It was not a word, not a promise, but it was enough. That night, as the child slept peacefully, the soldier sat near the door, his weapon close, his eyes watching the shadows outside. The mother sat across from him, her voice soft. "You bring food every day. Why?" His answer came slowly, filled with the weight of his heart. "Because I could not walk past your hungry eyes and do nothing." He looked at her directly, his voice stronger. "And because I want you to stay." The mother froze, her breath sharp. She stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. But his eyes were steady, his words clear. "Come stay with me." The silence that followed was heavy. Her heart pounded, her mind screamed with fear and doubt. To stay meant risking everything. To stay meant breaking the last wall between them. But then she looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully for the first time since the war. She thought of the food, the herbs, the wooden bird, the nights he had risked his life for them, and she knew the answer had already been written in her heart. Slowly, she nodded, her eyes glistening. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of hope. "We stay." The soldier exhaled, relief flooding through him. For the first time in months, his heart felt light. He sat beside them, the three of them together in the small shelter, no longer strangers, no longer enemies, but something new, something fragile, something strong. Outside, the war still raged, the shadows still circled, but inside, in that small space, a promise had been made, a promise of protection, of trust, of something far greater than survival. And so the story that began with silent food in the ruins ended with an invitation not just to stay in a shelter, but to stay in a bond that no war could ever destroy.